We could soon learn new details on the FBI's search of former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. A Florida judge ordered the government to propose a redacted document for public release of the affidavit used to justify the operation. Meanwhile, former Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg pleaded guilty to tax evasion yesterday. Senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge is outside the Justice Department with more on these latest developments. Catherine, good morning. Now, the judge in this case actually told the Justice Department to go back and present him with a redacted version in about a week, and then things will move forward.
That's right, Anne-Marie. Good morning. Thursday's court action in New York and Florida could have significant ramifications for the former president, who, as you note, is facing multiple civil and criminal investigations. Meantime, the Justice Department has just 6 days to propose what information should be blacked out or redacted from that affidavit. A Trump spokesman said the entire record should be public.
On Thursday, the federal judge who approved the FBI search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home almost 2 weeks ago found the Justice Department had not met the high threshold for showing that the entire affidavit should remain sealed. But he did order the immediate release of these other procedural records that provided some insight into the possible crimes that led to the Mar-a-Lago search. They include willful retention of national defense information, concealment or removal of government records, and obstruction of a federal investigation.
We are entitled to monitor the affairs of our government at all levels.
The judge agreed with media organizations, including CBS News, that at least some of the affidavit that supports the Mar-a-Lago search could be unsealed.
It is up to the public to determine what is meaningful in this investigation.
Prosecutors argued releasing any portion of the affidavit would threaten their investigation and the safety of potential witnesses and the FBI agents involved.
Well, DOJ is saying there's a lot more to come.
Scott Frederickson is a former federal prosecutor.
How extraordinary is this situation?
It's surprising that the judge is willing to unseal any part of the affidavit. The government wins these arguments 99 out of 100 times. And whether it's President Trump or anybody else who's the target of this search warrant, that's very bad news.
Meanwhile, in a state court in New York City, the Trump Organization's former chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, pleaded guilty, admitting to conspiring with the former president's company to evade taxes on nearly $2 million worth of corporate perks.
Alan, how'd it go in there?
In the plea deal, Weisselberg agreed to jail time and agreed to testify against the Trump Organization, but not the former president himself, when the case is scheduled to go to trial in the fall, Anne-Marie.
Okay, we are going to get to that, but I want to discuss the possibility of portions of this affidavit being unsealed. Can you just talk about the significance of that, and could it set some sort of precedent?
As you heard from that former prosecutor, and also based on my experience of 20 years covering this area, it's really unheard of for a judge to completely reject the Justice Department's request for secrecy and keeping these records sealed, citing the necessity because of an ongoing investigation. So it's unprecedented just at that level. And whatever we see here from the affidavit that becomes public will also be unprecedented, because at the end of the day, this is an ongoing criminal investigation, Anne-Marie.
So the judge is giving the prosecutors, 1 week to file a proposed redacted version. I know in your career you have read many of redacted documents, and in some cases, a whole page could be redacted, but one word. Do we have any idea, just how much of the affidavit could be released to the public?
Just as a starting point, in their filings, the government seemed to make the case that if they blacked out or redacted all of the sensitive information that they think could really be a roadmap to their investigation, they told the judge it's going to be a sea of black. There's going to be nothing there. I think that may have been a bad strategy, because now the judge has said, okay, you show me what is so sensitive it can't be public, and I'm going to decide whether I think that's justified. So we simply don't know what the document's going to look like. But the Justice Department is now being asked to justify kind of a line-by-line explanation as to why this information should not be public. And then it's up to the judge. And then, we could be looking at an appeal, right? So we could be still weeks away from seeing this record.
So what is the Justice Department most concerned about? We understand that, names will probably be blacked out, but are they concerned about other information being gleaned from a document if too much of it is revealed?
Well, I'm going to explain it this way. One of the best pieces of advice I was given by an intelligence operative is that you can have a lot of information that's not classified that you can find on the internet, but when you pull it together in a certain fashion, it becomes classified because it's filling in all the pieces of the puzzle. It's kind of the same scenario here. A lot of information may be blacked out or redacted, but they're at-home sleuths, internet sleuths, people who are going to try and piece it together, and their argument is that creates the jeopardy or potential jeopardy for these witnesses who may cease to cooperate because they feel threatened, and then also the agents that were involved, Anne-Marie.
We know all about the people who do their own research on the internet. Before I let you go, got to ask you about the Trump Organization's former CFO, Alan Weisselberg, pleading guilty. He was facing up to 15 years in prison. He's probably going to serve about 100 days. He's got a whopping fine he's got to pay. But you made a key distinction. He also has to promise to testify against the Trump Organization. That's not Donald Trump.
That's right. So I guess you could say, based on what we heard from former prosecutors, it's a win for the New York State case that he's pled guilty. And it's going to be tough for the Trump Organization to have someone who was running it called to testify. They may ultimately be a hostile witness, but called to testify about that group's business practices. But there's this very important carve out, at least at this point, that he's not going to be testifying or can't be forced to testify against former President Donald Trump. And that matters because all of these investigations are sort of intertwined, and they're different intersections that are going to be coming up as we move into the fall and then also after the midterm elections. I think it's important to say that former President Trump has maintained his innocence, and he insists that these investigations are politically motivated from his point of view.
He does, Catherine. Thank you very much.